as you've heard many people say already, Happy Easter. Also happens to be one of the few times, in fact it only happens every 33 years, that the other two Abrahamic religions also have their high holy day. So happy Passover for those of you that practice that, and Ramadan Kareem for those of you that might be of the Islam faith. We are glad to have you all here with us. We get our roots and our philosophy from those three Abrahamic traditions, along with lots of other wonderful mystics throughout the ages. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, was a master at studying and synthesizing materials and finding those golden threads of truth that he called them and bringing those forth as he built the philosophy that we practice here at Centers for Spiritual Living. And so we are so happy to have you here with us. Whatever religion that brought you to us, whether you've had one or not, we are glad to have you here with us, and we honor you just the way you are for being here. This year, actually, we're working on a theme called Building a Community. As many of you have heard, we are in the process of actually building a building for our community right now on East Russell Road. And so we are excited to see what unfolds through that. And so as it seemed to be so perfect to align our theme for the year of building community, bringing our community back together in a greater way, we decided that would be perfect to go along with our building of a physical space too. So each month we have a different theme for the month, and this month, as you might have guessed, is love. So love is what we're talking about this month, and today's title, my talk title, is The Greatest Love. And so as we get ready to move into this time of sharing and so forth, I want you to bring forth that sense of love within yourself right now. Just take a moment and just see if you can tap into a feeling of love that you might have had at any point during this week, this month, this year, or at any time during your life. Just tap into that and feel that love. And just feel how palpable it is within you. And so as I said, most of the Christian world right now is celebrating Easter. The Orthodox Christianity celebrates it next weekend. And so I can't say all of Christianity, but most of it is celebrating this weekend. And I'd like to take a look at this idea of the Easter service, the Easter day, Easter events, from the way our founder would have done it, through a metaphysical point of view. So metaphysics is a branch of philosophy that looks at existence, at being, at cause and effect, at reality, and how all of this comes into play in our lives. It is the science of transcending things that are physical or natural and taking them into a more esoteric point of view. And so I want to look at Easter from that point of view. I think one of the most frequently quoted passages in the New Testament comes from the book of John 3:16. If it's not the most quoted, it's certainly the most one that you see on the back of cars, more often than any other quote. And sometimes it's just the numbers, John 3:16. So depending on the version of the Bible that you're reading, John 3:16 says something like this: "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, so that whoever believeth in him shall have life everlasting and not perish." And so this is kind of the essence of who and what Jesus was this being that came from Spirit, that Spirit so loved, he brought it forth into existence and allowed it to become the being that we knew as Jesus of Nazareth. But let's take a moment and step back. As I said, that came from the New Testament. The New Testament is a collection of books that were chosen to represent the ideas of Christianity by a group of people in the 3rd century. And they decided that of the 12 apostles, all of whom had books written after them, only 4 of them were worth going into the new Bible. So we start off the New Testament with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those are 4 of the disciples of Jesus of Nazareth. So the first book of the New Testament, the book of Matthew, was written somewhere around 20 years after the death of Jesus. It was not written by the man named Matthew. It was written by his followers. And what it was a written account of the oral stories. How many of you have ever played that telephone game? Where you say a sentence to one person and they say it to the next person, and then it goes all the way down the line, and then at the end of it somebody repeats the sentence back and we all laugh at how it changed. So, were these actual factual sayings of the man we know as Jesus? I don't know, I wasn't there. The book of Mark, Luke, and John were written sometime between 70 CE and 100 CE. So 40 to 60 years after, 40 to 70 years after the death of Jesus. And again, they are not written by the people they are named after. They are written by their followers. Recorded versions of the stories. So the Jews of first century spoke a language called Aramaic. But scholars and people who could write in the first century wrote in Greek. So we have stories told in Aramaic, written down in Greek. Probably a little translation issues there. Then, as the centuries progressed, those stories, those books, were rewritten because there weren't printing presses, there weren't anything else. People had to write them by hand. And so from the Greek, they moved into being recorded in Latin. Again, translation issues going on there. When we think of the word love, just the word love that we're talking about this month, in Greek there are 8 different words for love. And so you can imagine how that can get convoluted as you're translating from one language to another. And then, of course, in the middle of the 14th century, Johann Gutenberg invented his printing press, and he started printing them out to where other people could read them. And he printed in Latin. And eventually it was translated into Old English and other languages as it moved forth. All of that is to say, what's written in the New Testament may or may not be accurate. But that's not what's important. It's what it means for each one of us. It's what we get out of the message that's important here. It's not the literal translation of it. It's not the fact that it was written and rewritten and rewritten and rewritten. It's what it is when it comes alive inside of us. And I'll speak a little bit more about that in a minute. I also want to remind you that there were other books written by the other disciples too. In 1945, in a town outside of Egypt, Nakamati, Egypt, in a cave, a man found a barrel, a ceramic barrel, full of manuscripts. And they have become known as the Gnostic Gospels. In there we have books from Thomas, Peter, Simon, James, Thaddeus, and, shockingly enough, Mary Magdalene. These books were deemed not appropriate for the Bible by the people who were putting the Bible together. In fact, they were so inappropriate that there was an order to destroy them all. And somehow somebody took these books and hid them away in a cave in Egypt for 1,600 years until they could be unearthed and brought forth. So, again, as I said, are these all the literal words of the man that we knew as Jesus of Nazareth? We don't know. But each one of them has a meaning for us as it comes alive inside of us. Our task now, and has always been, is to not take it literally, but to find meaning and inspiration in the words as we contemplate them, the words as we take them into our soul, and to look for that truth that is revealed to us through us. This is the example that Jesus brought forth, was taking in the message and letting it become alive inside of us. So in the book of John, it begins with the phrase, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God." And then a few lines later it said, "And the Word became flesh." I think this is a key statement of Jesus' ministry, is that we have this word, this idea, this truth, this perfect emanation of that thought, and we allow it to become flesh within us. We allow it to become alive within us. The truth has always been the truth. And as we take that truth into contemplation and it actually begins to grow in us, then we get that feeling that I say, and I say this a lot, is we know what we know and we can never unknow it. When the truth has come alive inside of us, there is nothing that can happen to make us not think that that is the truth. So what is that truth? That universal, all-pervasive truth that we can never unknow? Well, that truth is that we're part of the greatest love story ever told. Ever written, ever conceived of, ever brought forth. We, each one of us individually, is an integral part of that divine love story. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, puts it this way. God, the divine creator, never had but one child. This child is being born at every season, in every place, through all races and in all nations. Every birth is a divine event. Every conception, immaculate. Every child who is born into the world represents the child of the eternal parent. We spend too much time looking at these events around things like the Easter story and trying to make them real, trying to make them factual, trying to find the history of them. I think it's part of our analytical mind that likes to figure things out and put things in order and get everything right. But we spend so much time on that, and it has caused so many problems in our world by trying to focus on those factual events as opposed to what is here for me to know, what is here for me to bring alive inside of me. We forget that all of the great teachers, all of them, teachers like Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, Rumi, they didn't teach in factual events. They taught in metaphors, in parables, in stories. They tried to take these high and holy concepts and bring them into real life for people. And they tried to bring them alive inside of them through the stories that they told. I love to study the work of Joel Goldsmith, and in his book, The Contemplative Life, he says it this way. A spiritual teaching penetrates beneath every human symbol of its spiritual meaning. What is plainly set forth for all to read in the scriptures of all people of the world are exoteric teachings, outer teachings. But each one of these has an esoteric, an inner meaning. That is to say, the outer teachings all have inner or hidden meanings. So, what's the meaning of Easter? The horrors of the Passion, the crucifixion, the resurrection. What is there for us to know? Why did this man we call Jesus have to go through this horrific pain and betrayal to get his message out into the world? Well, again, I think we need to go back to the book of John. Right before he says, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, John is telling the story of Jesus' encounter with a man named Nicodemus. Now, Nicodemus was a Pharisee. That meant he was one of the rulers of Jerusalem at the time. He was one of the most educated, most respected, most sought after for his advice. You didn't get much more learned than people like Nicodemus. And Jesus is telling him that you need to be born again. And so what does Nicodemus do? He goes right to the literal meaning of that. What, do I have to crawl back in my mother's womb and be born again? How can that be possible? And Jesus says, you are not born of the flesh, but you're born of the Spirit. You need to be reborn of the Spirit through the water. He's talking about baptism at the time. But this is what Jesus says to Nicodemus. He says, you are Israel's teacher, and you do not understand these things. We speak of what we know. We testify to what we have seen, But still, you people do not accept our testimony. I speak to you of earthly things and you do not understand. Then how will you ever believe if I speak of heavenly things? I think this was the pivotal point in Jesus' ministry. I think this was the point in which he realized to what extent he had to go to get his message out. That the only way that it was going to be possible for the people to understand what he was talking about being reborn spiritually, was for him to die physically and then be resurrected afterwards. You know, all of these metaphors that are used in the New Testament were also used to connect to the teachings of the Old Testament and to the other historical text of the time of the Jews of the first century. They had lots of metaphors and lots of historical wisdom and mysticism that was built into all of their teachings. And so Jesus' stories were meant to connect all of that together. And so he needed to find a way to connect this idea of being born again into something that the people of the time could understand. So he was all about creating enlightenment. And enlightenment is the central metaphor for salvation, to be free of any of the earthly binds. To be born again is an enlightenment experience. And so how could Jesus show the profound nature of that experience without actually dying? In his book, Reading the Bible Again for the First Time, author Mark Sporg says this: the way or the path of Jesus is the path of death and resurrection, understood as a metaphor for a religious life. That way, the path of dying to an old way of being and being born into a new way of being is the only way to God. Many of us, as we come into a center like this, as we begin to study, as we begin to practice the spiritual practices that we have, as we begin to embody the principles, our lives begin to change. Is there anybody in here that life didn't change for them? I'm just curious. Mine was like, it was certainly much more than a 180-degree turn for me. What happens is we begin to find that our habits that we've had, we no longer want to engage in those. Oftentimes our addictions fall away. We can just no longer be the way that we were. Along with that, we often find that our family doesn't fit with us anymore. Our family of origin, especially. We find that friends fall away. Our life is restructured as we come into a spiritual teaching. As we begin to understand and embody these principles, we become changed. We are born again. And I believe that this is the message of the Easter story, is that by embodying these spiritual principles, embodying these ideas, by actually taking them into us and letting them come alive inside of us, we are born again. We can't go back to a life before. The idea of it is just abhorrent for most of us. Going back to the way we used to be, the way we used to think. That life has died. And we've been reborn in this idea of spiritual truth, of the oneness that we embody. So as I say every week, these ideas and these principles are wonderful, but they're no good if we don't put them into practice. So let's do a little practice right now. This practice comes from Joel Goldsmith. It's called contemplative meditation. And in there we take a passage. Now we could take a passage from any spiritual scripture that we wanted to take. We could take a passage that's just a profound quote that we've read somewhere. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just that we want to take some time and spend with it. So for the sake of ease, let's take one of my favorite passages from the Bible, because, it's all about me. So, just saying. You may be familiar with this one. It comes from Proverbs. Be still and know. It goes on to say, be still and know that I am God. But I like to just be still and know. So if you would with me, just taking a deep breath. And you can close your eyes if you'd like. You're safe in your chair. Nobody's going to come up and grab you from behind. By closing my eyes, I kind of center myself a little bit better by connecting with my breath. I connect with my body. Just breathe in a couple of times. And now I want you to repeat that phrase in your mind. You don't have to say it aloud, just in your mind. Be still and know. Be still and know. Be still and know. And now let's break it into two short phrases. Be still, and then and know. So let's just start with be still. Say that in your mind. And then ask yourself the question, what does it mean to be still? If your mind starts to wander, just say again, be still. Be still. Move to the second part of the phrase, and know. Know what? What does that mean? And know. And know. Be still and know. And now let's break it into each of the four words. Doing the same process. The word be. Be what? What does that mean? Still. What does still mean? And. And finally, the word know. What does it mean to know? Be still and know. So just taking another deep breath. Notice the chair around you, the chair beneath you, people around you, movement of the air. When you're ready, just go ahead and open your eyes. We can take any spiritual truth and do this process with it. But it's not a matter of doing it once. It needs to come alive in us, and that takes time. Joel Goldsmith took that phrase, be still and know, and worked with it for an entire year, every day, until it came alive inside of him. That's where spiritual truth is revealed. That's when we know that we know, and we can never unknow it. When it comes alive inside of us. Let me leave you with one more quote from our founder, Ernest Holmes. It says, we believe in Jesus, and we believe in Buddha too. We believe in Socrates and Mohammed. We believe in every way shower. And more than anything else, we believe in our own soul. The only immediate testimony you and I will ever have that we exist or that God exists or that we have been shown a way is through our own soul. We believe in our own soul. And we believe in every way shower. And because of this, it's my favorite line, and because of this, we are one of the first denominations to be free of superstition, damnation, dualism, and dogma. Yay! We say no to those things. All right, let's take this into prayer. I'm going to invite our practitioners to stand and surround us. Our practitioners spend at least 4 years studying spiritual truth, studying the works of these wonderful people, allowing the Word to come alive in them, and them to come alive in the Word. And so we're going to go into our affirmative prayer. This is a unique form of prayer that is not often taught in most faiths. We have 5 steps. In the first step, we recognize the presence of that universal love intelligence, that creator. In the second stage, we align ourselves with it. In the third stage, we speak words of truth, affirmations. In the fourth stage, we give thanks. And then because of all of that, we just simply let it go. So if you would with me, turn within. And again, I just do this by taking a breath and connecting with my body, closing my eyes and centering myself. And so right here and right now, I know that there is only one thing happening, and that is the action and the activity of the divine. I know that that one loving, creative intelligence has brought forth everything into existence. I know that it is the isness and the allness and the fullness of all life, now and forevermore. I know that nothing exists outside of this one, this creative love intelligence that so loved it needed to express itself through its creation. And I know that I am one with that creator. That infinite intelligence is living through me right here and right now. And because I know this is true for me, I know this is true for everyone. That each one of us is a perfect and unique emanation of that divine creative love intelligence. Each one of us has been brought forth to fulfill a specific need, purpose, and desire of that Creator. And we are doing so beautifully. And so knowing this truth, I speak my word. I know that right here and right now, there is a divine flow of unconditional love moving through each and every one of us. It is showing up through us in all that we are and all that we do. It shows up in the connections we have with other people. It shows up in the work that we do in this world. It shows up in the care that we give to our family and our friends and our four-legged companions. It shows up in every aspect of our being. Because love is the nature of who we are. It's why we were created. It's what we are here to do. And how good it is to know this. How good it is to see it in action right here and right now in this community, in this town, in this world. Knowing that that divine flow of love is manifesting itself in, through, and as all of creation gives us a great deal of hope for the future of all mankind. And so I just simply give thanks for this knowing. I'm so grateful to feel it. I'm so grateful to see it operating. I'm so grateful to know that this is the truth. And I release this word into the law, the creative mind of spirit that always says yes. I let it go and I let it be. And together we say, and so it is.